My son, my own flesh and blood, pushed me out of his wedding, just like I was nothing to him.
Smiles, laughter, champagne, all around me. But I was invisible. Guests whispered, cameras clicked, and he didn't even look at me. I stood there, frozen, my heart shattering in 1,000 silent pieces. And then I realized something. The entire venue, the lavish ballroom, the crystal chandeliers, it was all paid for by me, in cash. But what I discovered next changed everything. I never thought I'd feel so small in a room full of people who were supposed to love me. I always believed that love lasts, that sacrifices are remembered, that children, no matter how grown, never forget the ones who raised them. But life has a cruel way of twisting the knife. I raised my son, Daniel, alone. His father walked out when Daniel was barely 3, leaving me with nothing but bills, broken promises, and a stubborn toddler who refused to eat peas. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads and clothes on his back. I didn't complain. I never did. Because I loved him, more than I loved myself, more than anything in the world. Our mornings were always chaotic. I'd wake him for school with pancakes burning on the stove. He'd protest, drag his feet, but his smile when he finally sat down made the mess worth it. Those little moments, the laughter, the arguments over homework, the scraped knees I kissed better, were my treasures. They were small, fleeting, but they were ours. Daniel grew up smart, handsome, charming. I was proud, sure, but also nervous. Boys like him attract trouble. Girls like him, well, women like his fiancée, could be dangerous. But I never imagined that the danger would come from my own home, my own son. I remember the first time I noticed the cracks. It was subtle. A text message he deleted too quickly. A secretive smile. An invitation he accidentally left on the counter. Nothing concrete. Just shadows of distance creeping between us. I blamed myself. Maybe I was too protective. Maybe I meddled too much. I told myself he'd come back. He always did. Daniel met Vanessa 2 years ago. She was charming, perfect. The kind of woman you can't help but admire, on the surface. But there was something in her eyes that unsettled me. Calculating. Cold. I ignored it, telling myself I was being paranoid. Mothers are supposed to love their sons' choices. Mothers are supposed to trust. Life seemed normal, busy, loud, ordinary. Weekends were filled with soccer practice, grocery runs, movie nights. We laughed, we argued, we fought over trivial things. I thought these were just the bumps of life. I thought I knew him. I thought he loved me. Then came the engagement. Vanessa, radiant in her white dress, holding Daniel's hand like they owned the world. I smiled. I really did. I believed it was a day of joy. I even helped in secret, saving and scraping to contribute something meaningful. I paid for the venue in cash, months before anyone knew their wedding plans. It was my way of showing love without demanding recognition. I never expected gratitude, just the chance to be part of their happiness. The first hint of betrayal came when the invitations arrived. My name, absent. I thought it was a mistake, a printing error. I called Daniel. He said it was complicated. He didn't explain. Just, "It's better if you don't come, Mom. Really." My chest tightened. My hands shook. "Complicated?" I whispered to the phone. "This is my son. How can it be complicated?" Weeks passed. I tried to remain calm, hoping he'd change his mind, hoping he'd realize that nothing, not a fiancé, not a new life, not his own pride, could erase what we shared. But he didn't. And I could see Vanessa's influence growing. Friends of Daniel whispered to me, "She's very controlling. She doesn't want anyone in the way. Your son, he's afraid of upsetting her." Every word felt like a hammer to my chest. Still, I kept quiet. I told myself I'd wait. I'd show love, not anger. But the closer the wedding came, the more the whispers became certainty. And yet, I kept a secret. My secret weapon. The entire wedding venue. Paid for. In cash. Hidden from them both. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are invisible until revealed. Our last dinner together before the wedding was ordinary, but tense. Daniel smiled at Vanessa across the table, oblivious to my trembling hands. "Mom, can you pass the bread?" he asked casually. I passed it. No hug, no eye contact. Just bread. My heart twisted. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled anyway. I thought about my life then. The sleepless nights, the tears I shed alone, the sacrifices I made for this boy. And a cold fury began to stir. I couldn't let this betrayal go unnoticed. Not publicly, not quietly, not without him understanding the weight of everything I had done. The night before the wedding, I packed a small bag. I didn't know what I would do yet. I only knew I would not be invisible. I could be humiliated, ignored, rejected, but I wouldn't disappear without leaving a mark. My son had forgotten the woman who raised him, but I had not forgotten him. And then the day arrived. I stood outside the grand hall. Music floated into the air. Guests arrived in shimmering gowns and tuxedos. Laughter echoed. Champagne glasses clinked. And I was just a shadow. I watched as Daniel passed by me, hand in Vanessa's, his eyes full of joy. My heart shattered. My blood boiled. I could feel every beat, every betrayal, every moment of unrecognized sacrifice pulsing through me. And then I remembered. The venue. Every chandelier. Every marble step. Every gilded chair. It was all mine. Paid in cash. I had the power. Hidden, quiet, unstoppable. And that's when I smiled. A small, sharp, satisfied smile. But what I discovered next changed everything. The morning of the wedding, I woke with a knot in my stomach. I told myself it was nerves. But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. Something was cruel. I arrived at the venue early, my hands clutching a small bouquet I'd picked myself. Daniel was nowhere to be seen, of course. Vanessa stood near the entrance, radiant, flawless. She barely glanced at me. I tried to speak. "Daniel's not ready for you yet," she said, her smile thin, almost cruel. "I'm his mother," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I have a right to—" "His mother?" She cut me off sharply. "Not here, not today. Please, just step aside." I froze. Step aside? At my son's wedding? My chest tightened. My mind raced. Was this real or some nightmare? Guests began to arrive. Laughter and music filled the air, and I felt every eye on me. Or maybe it was just my imagination. Some whispered. Some stared. Some smiled awkwardly. I could hear it. "She's not supposed to be here." I tried the obvious. "Daniel, can you at least—" He appeared then, in his tuxedo, tall and smiling. But when his eyes met mine, there was nothing. No warmth, no recognition, just a polite, distant gaze. "Mom," he said lightly, as though we were strangers on the street. "You really shouldn't be here." My hands shook. "Daniel, this is your wedding. I paid for the venue. Everything you see here, it's mine. I worked for this. For you." He laughed. A sharp, cutting laugh. "You don't get it, do you? None of this is yours. I don't want you involved. Not today. Not ever. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The air around me seemed to thicken. I tried to speak, but my voice broke. My son, my baby, was rejecting me, publicly, cruelly. I turned to the wedding planner, desperate. Surely you know the truth. This hall, the chairs, the decorations, they were paid for by me. The planner looked uncomfortable, glancing at Vanessa. I can't discuss that here. I swallowed my tears. You can't discuss that? It's my money. It's my gift. How can you? But it was too late. Guests were arriving. Music was playing. And the wedding march began. I stood frozen, humiliated, as Daniel walked past me, hand in Vanessa's. His smile for her only. It kept getting worse. During the reception, I overheard snippets of conversation. Her son must hate her, one guest whispered. She's embarrassing herself, another muttered. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the shadows, but I couldn't. I was too furious, too shattered, too alive with a need to be seen. Later, I confronted Vanessa privately, hoping for a human response. You think this is funny? I demanded. You've erased me from my own son's life. She tilted her head, cold, venomous. I didn't erase you. Daniel did. And frankly, it's better this way. You've always been overbearing, controlling. And now? She smirked. You're irrelevant. Irrelevant. The word burned into me like acid. I wanted to scream, to hit her, to throw every vase in the room at her. But I stayed quiet. For now. The betrayal didn't stop there. Daniel's father, long absent, a ghost in our lives, appeared suddenly at the reception. He leaned close to Daniel and whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but Daniel laughed. A shared joke, a secret alliance. My blood ran cold. I realized then that the humiliation was complete. My son had chosen her over me. Chosen to forget every scraped knee I'd kissed, every sleepless night I'd endured, every sacrifice I'd made. And it didn't end. Vanessa invited me to give a toast. I stood there trembling, microphone in hand. The room full of strangers, cameras focused, Daniel smiling at her. I opened my mouth, and the words that came out were soft, almost pathetic. I love you, Daniel. And I hope your day is beautiful. He looked at me with mild annoyance, as if I were an inconvenient fly buzzing near his perfect wedding. Thank you, he said, barely above a whisper. And then the moment that shattered me completely. Vanessa leaned close, whispered in his ear, and laughed. He laughed back. My son, laughing at her joke, and not mine. The wedding hall spun around me. I stumbled, barely holding the microphone, my heart breaking in slow, excruciating pieces. I ran out of the room, needing air, needing escape. In the hallway, I sank against the wall. I felt invisible. I felt discarded. I felt betrayed beyond reason. I had always believed that love was unconditional, that sacrifices counted, that the bond between mother and child was unbreakable. I had been wrong. Every step I had taken, every sleepless night, every dollar I earned, it had been forgotten, ignored, trampled. And yet, amidst the tears and rage, a small spark ignited. The venue, every chandelier, every golden chair, every corner of this luxurious hall. It was all mine. I realized then that I still held the power, the invisible power, the one they didn't see. And slowly, carefully, a plan began to form in my mind. I would not let this betrayal define me. Not publicly, not privately, Not ever. As I stood there, trying to steady my shaking hands, I overheard Vanessa whisper to one of her friends, "Can you believe she still shows up? Who does that?" I smiled. Small, sharp, cold. She didn't know. She had no idea that every step she took in this hall was made possible by me. Every decoration, every expensive plate, every soft candlelight, they were all funded by my hard work, my sacrifice. The humiliation had been complete, the betrayal undeniable. But now, the game had shifted. I was no longer just the victim. I was the quiet storm before the hurricane. And that's when I realized this was no longer just about being insulted or excluded. This was about justice and revenge. I spent the night after the wedding awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city. Every moment replayed in my mind like a cruel film. Daniel laughing at Vanessa's jokes, guests whispering about me. The invisible mother who had given everything. I had hit rock bottom, not just sadness, not just heartbreak, something deeper, a hollow, cold emptiness that made my chest ache and my hands shake. I had been erased, completely, and yet strangely, amid the pain, I felt something else, a flicker, anger, sharp, vivid, and alive. I wandered the quiet streets, past streetlights casting long shadows, past families laughing, past couples holding hands. Everywhere I looked, I felt a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. My son, my place in his life, my dignity. But I also began to notice something else. Opportunities. Threads of possibility that no one saw because they were too busy celebrating, too busy believing they had won. The first spark came the next morning when I found the unopened envelope from the wedding planner. Inside were receipts, contracts, and a detailed ledger. I had forgotten. I had paid in cash for everything, down to the last candle, the last chair, the last plate. No one knew. Not Daniel, not Vanessa, not the planner. They assumed it had been a gift from Daniel's father or from Vanessa's family, but it was all me. My hands trembled as I went through the papers. Each receipt was a reminder. Every payment a testament to my sacrifice. And suddenly, the humiliation of the previous day didn't feel permanent. I realized something crucial. I wasn't powerless. I had been invisible, yes, but that invisibility was my weapon. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. I sat at the edge of my bed, head in my hands, thinking about all the moments that had led here. Daniel had chosen to ignore me, to erase me, to side with someone who didn't deserve him. Vanessa had thought she could walk over me, control him, make him forget the woman who raised him. And for a moment, I let my tears fall. Then I stopped. No, this wasn't the end. I needed allies, but I had to be careful. I couldn't trust anyone blindly. The first person I thought of was the wedding planner. She had access, she had knowledge, and she had a conscience. Maybe. I called her cautiously, pretending to be a distant relative, asking for clarification. I asked about receipts, payments, and logistics. She hesitated. I could hear it in her voice. Fear, guilt, both. Yes, there might have been a misunderstanding, she said softly, but I don't know if I should. I just want to understand, I said evenly. I want the truth. Please. It took hours, but eventually, she confessed. Everything. The cash payments. The deposits I had made months ago. She hadn't told anyone because she assumed Daniel would handle it. But he never did. And Vanessa? She had used my generosity as a shield, pretending the wedding was her family's doing. My lips curled into a small, triumphant smile. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. The power had shifted. I had the leverage. They didn't know it yet, but soon they would. I started to make a plan. Not a reckless plan, not a scream and shout plan, a careful, patient strategy, a plan that would expose the truth, humiliate the betrayers, and restore my dignity. Every action had to be precise, every word timed, every revelation deliberate. I began by creating a mental map. Vanessa's friends, Daniel's closest colleagues, the family members who had quietly supported the wedding. Everyone was a piece in this puzzle. I noted their tendencies, their loyalties, and their potential reactions. I imagined the perfect moment when each person would finally see what had really happened. Then came the most important part, rehearsing my approach. I practiced my expressions, my words, my timing. I imagined standing in the grand hall again, but this time I would be in control. I would not tremble. I would not beg. I would show them, calmly and undeniably, that the truth was mine. But I also knew that revenge alone wasn't enough. I needed a narrative. I needed people to understand that I had been betrayed, humiliated, and yet remained strong. I needed the world to see the injustice and then watch it corrected. In the days that followed, I began planting seeds. Subtle hints to friends who had attended the wedding. Casual mentions in conversations with mutual acquaintances. Nothing overt, just whispers. A comment here, a question there. I was testing reactions, seeing who would listen, who would be curious, who might help me when the time came. And then, I discovered something I hadn't expected. A mistake. Vanessa had left a digital trail, a series of messages where she boasted about excluding me, about manipulating Daniel, about controlling the narrative. Screenshots, backups, emails. Enough evidence to not only prove my role in the wedding, but to expose her true nature. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the final piece. I could see the story unfolding in my mind. The truth revealed, the crowd's reaction, Daniel's shocked face. I could see myself standing tall, finally respected, finally vindicated. But I didn't rush. Patience was part of the strategy. I kept my interactions measured. I watched and waited. I let Vanessa and Daniel continue their false sense of victory. The higher they built themselves on lies, the more spectacular their fall would be. I even took precautions. I made copies of the receipts, the messages, the contracts, stored them in a safe place, invisible but undeniable, untouchable. The ultimate insurance policy. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, the city lights flickering through the window. My hands rested on the pile of papers and digital evidence. For the first time since the wedding, I felt something besides despair. I felt anticipation, quiet, simmering anticipation, the kind that makes your pulse quicken and your mind sharpen. The turning point had come. The rock bottom had served its purpose. I had discovered the hidden threads of power that everyone else ignored. I had found my secret weapon, and with it, the path to justice and revenge. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "They think they've won. They think they've erased me, but they have no idea what's coming." And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming your identity, your worth, your power. And I had all three. The storm was building. I could feel it in my chest, in my hands, in the very air around me. Soon it would be unstoppable. But before I could act, there was one final tantalizing twist. A secret I hadn't yet uncovered. One that could change everything. And I knew, deep down, that when I discovered it, the world as Daniel and Vanessa knew it would never be the same again. The day I decided to act, I woke early, my mind sharp and cold. Every detail was planned, every step calculated. This wasn't anger anymore. It was strategy. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to reveal the truth, quietly, decisively, publicly. I began with Vanessa's inner circle. I sent carefully worded messages to a few of her closest friends. Not threats, not accusations, just facts, receipts, screenshots, the truth she had tried to bury. I didn't ask for support, only attention. Seeds planted, curiosity awakened. Next, I contacted the wedding planner again. I reminded her of the receipts, of the ledger, of her responsibility to speak honestly. Slowly, she began to understand that this wasn't just a request, it was a reckoning. The anxiety in her voice told me she realized the storm was about to hit. Then came the subtle ripple through Daniel's family. Cousins, aunts, and uncles, who had been charmed by Vanessa's perfection, began asking questions. "Who paid for the hall?" they whispered. I thought it was her family. I didn't answer directly. I let the mystery grow. The tension was intoxicating. The first real shock came during a pre-wedding brunch that Vanessa had organized, meant to celebrate her dominance over the event. I arrived quietly, casually, as though I were a guest. But this time, I wasn't invisible. I carried a small folder, neatly organized, with every receipt, every message, every piece of proof of my role in creating this day. Vanessa noticed me immediately. Her smile faltered. "Oh, you're here." "Yes," I said softly, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm here." Her friends looked confused. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I could feel the room holding its breath. I opened the folder. I didn't yell. I didn't attack. I simply placed the documents on the table, one by one, methodically. Receipts showing cash deposits, screenshots of her boasting, contracts signed in my name, every proof of my generosity. "You see," I said, my voice steady, "this wedding, this hall, these decorations, everything was paid for by me, months ago, in cash. Every penny." Gasps echoed around the room. Daniel's face went pale. Vanessa's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Words failed her. I continued. "You've erased me. You've ignored my sacrifices. You humiliated me in front of everyone who should have loved me. But now, the truth is here." Daniel looked at me, eyes wide, disbelief written across his face. "Mom, I held up a hand. "Save it. Listen first. See what you've done." The room erupted into whispers. Guests compared receipts, messages, and contracts. Murmurs of, "I had no idea," and "She did all this," floated through the air. Vanessa tried to interject, but the documents spoke louder than any words. It was poetic justice. Not violent, not criminal, just undeniable truth. The very people she had tried to impress now looked at her differently. Some shook their heads. Some glanced at Daniel, silently questioning his judgment. Then came the most satisfying moment. The wedding planner, standing near the back, finally spoke up. "It's all true. Every payment came from her. She made this day possible." A hush fell over the room. Daniel's jaw dropped. Vanessa's confidence cracked. Her carefully constructed facade collapsed in front of everyone she had tried to impress. I felt a surge of triumph, but I didn't gloat. My satisfaction wasn't cruel. It was righteous. I had been invisible for too long. I had been humiliated for too long. And now, The scales were tipping. Daniel finally spoke, voice shaking. Mom, I didn't know. I thought. You thought? I repeated softly. You thought what? That I would vanish quietly while you erased me? That my sacrifices meant nothing? He looked at me, guilty and stunned. I could see the regret forming, but I didn't rush to forgiveness. This was a lesson he needed to feel fully. Vanessa, humiliated and exposed, tried to retreat, but no one paid attention. Her friend's eyes were wide, and whispers followed her wherever she moved. The people she had hoped would admire her now questioned her integrity, her honesty, and her character. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about recognition, about truth, about showing that I wasn't powerless, that my love and my sacrifices were visible, undeniable, and respected. As I stepped away from the table, I caught Daniel's eye. There was sorrow there, confusion, a sudden understanding of what he had done. But I stayed calm. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned, letting the weight of the revelation settle over the room. In the days that followed, word spread. Guests who had attended the brunch shared the story. Mutual friends reached out to me, offering support and admiration. Vanessa's social circle began to shift, subtly excluding her, questioning her motives, and noticing her arrogance. Daniel called me that night. His voice was low, hesitant. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I made a huge mistake. I listened quietly. I didn't respond immediately. My silence was part of the lesson. Finally, I said, Daniel, you'll understand eventually. Actions have consequences. Today was just a reminder. I hung up, feeling a weight lift from my chest. The humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. They hadn't disappeared entirely, but the balance had shifted. I had reclaimed my power without losing my dignity. I had taken what was mine: respect, recognition, truth. And then came the final flourish, the poetic justice that made every sleepless night, every tear, every sacrifice worth it. Vanessa attempted to post about the wedding on social media, trying to maintain her perfect image. But the evidence was everywhere. Guests tagged photos of the receipts, messages, and documents. Comments poured in. Praise for me, questions for her. The internet became a quiet court of justice. She realized, finally, that nothing could save her from the truth. Her control was gone. Her dominance, exposed as a facade. My revenge was complete, not violent, not cruel, but satisfying. Deeply, unshakably satisfying. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply breathed. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of balance restored. My son had learned the cost of forgetting me. Vanessa had learned that arrogance has consequences. And I had reclaimed my place in the world. As I looked at the photos, the messages, the stunned faces, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming yourself, your dignity, your worth. And today, I had done exactly that. The storm had passed, but its echoes would linger in Daniel's mind and Vanessa's heart for a long time. And that was the ultimate satisfaction. The days after the wedding felt quiet. Too quiet at first. The chaos had ended, but the echoes of it lingered. I woke in the mornings without the weight of humiliation pressing on my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. I walked through my house, noting the little things I had ignored in the rush of raising Daniel alone. The morning sunlight on the kitchen counter, the sound of the city outside my window, the smell of coffee brewing. Life had returned to me, not as a shadow, not as a background character, but as the woman I had always been. The phone rang. Messages came through. Friends, family, even acquaintances from Daniel's social circles reached out. Words of support, admiration, congratulations. You were so strong. You deserved to be recognized. We always knew you were amazing. I smiled softly. They didn't know everything, how deep the betrayal had cut, but they understood enough. They understood the courage it took to stand silently while being humiliated. They understood the strength it took to transform anger and pain into something purposeful. Daniel reached out too. His calls were hesitant at first, as though he feared my reaction. I answered once, then twice, then stopped. Not out of cruelty, but because I wanted him to understand that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. That love isn't automatic, it's nurtured. Vanessa. I heard she struggled socially, her arrogance exposed for everyone to see. Invitations stopped coming, friends drifted away, her perfectly curated image shattered. I didn't feel satisfaction in her pain. It was just poetic justice. Life had a way of balancing itself. I took time for myself. Long walks, quiet evenings reading, cooking for no one but me, rediscovering passions I had neglected while trying to give everything to my son. And slowly, I began to notice something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. Pure, quiet, unshakable joy. I even reconnected with old friends, people who had drifted away, distracted by their own lives, returned once they saw me standing tall, unbroken. The truth has a way of drawing the right people toward you, and I welcomed them, embraced them, laughed with them. One evening, I found myself looking at the wedding photos that Daniel had shared online, carefully avoiding the ones where I had been humiliated. But then I paused at a single image. Me, standing calmly, folder in hand, evidence displayed. The faces around me, shocked, questioning, amazed. That was the moment I realized just how far I had come. No longer invisible, no longer dismissed, no longer powerless. I allowed myself a small, private smile. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge anymore. It was in reclaiming my life. In knowing that I had stood up, silently but firmly, and altered the course of events. That my sacrifices had been seen. That my love had been recognized. Daniel eventually called again, weeks later. His voice was filled with regret, tinged with desperation. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I can't believe I treated you that way." I listened. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't need to. Sometimes lessons must be learned fully, painfully. And he had learned, in his own time. I said only this: "Daniel, love isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who stood by you. Today was a lesson you'll never forget." He paused, the line silent. I could hear him thinking, realizing, feeling the weight of his actions. And that was enough. Life moved forward. I focused on myself. I took a long weekend to travel. Just me, the open road, the horizon ahead. Freedom tasted sweet. The world seemed larger, brighter, and filled with possibilities. I had been humbled, yes, but also strengthened. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair had forged me into someone unshakable. Friends began inviting me to events, asking for my advice, my company. People who once overlooked me now sought me out. I had gained something I never expected: respect. Not just from strangers, but from myself. I started a small project, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. A community initiative, helping other mothers who felt invisible, dismissed, or betrayed. Each story reminded me of my own journey. Each success filled me with a quiet pride. My pain had become a tool, a source of inspiration, a beacon for others. Daniel reached out occasionally, his voice tentative, still unsure. I answered when I wanted. I didn't answer when I didn't. Boundaries had been set. Respect had been earned. And slowly, he began to understand that the world doesn't revolve around entitlement. I thought often about Vanessa, the woman who had tried to erase me, to control my son's life, to rewrite history. I felt neither hatred nor joy in her downfall, only the calm knowledge that truth has a way of revealing itself. And in the end, her own arrogance had been her undoing. I learned something vital from all of this. Power doesn't always come from wealth, charm, or control. Sometimes it comes from patience, from knowing the truth, from standing silently until the moment is right, and when it arrives, no one can ignore it. Looking back, I realized that the wedding was never truly about the event itself. It was about recognition, validation, justice. And in that sense, it was perfect. Every laugh, every whisper, every moment of shock played its role. Every ounce of pain I endured had led me here, to strength, freedom, and dignity restored. I keep the folder now, neatly tucked away, not out of malice, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is a path to light. That even when they try to erase you, you can reclaim your place. That even when betrayal cuts deepest, you can rise higher than ever before. And sometimes, late at night, I still think of Daniel. Not with anger, not with sorrow, but with quiet certainty. He has learned. He has felt the weight of what he did, and he will never forget. Because truth is unforgettable. Because love, when tested and proven, cannot be denied. And that was the day he realized he'd lost everything. Now, my parents call me every week, but I never answer. I have my life back, my dignity, my respect, and most importantly, my peace.